right, you guys, welcome and thank you so much for attending the Big Ask. This session is going to be really about defining what your future in the workplace looks like for yourself and for maybe within your home life as well. So if you guys are new to Lake Village and you're new to the concept, Lake Village is a co-working space with on-site childcare. This is what we do here. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time doing is talking about how to define what that workplace is. And so after spending one of our many afternoons talking about this with my fabulous friend, Jess Feldt of Jess Feldt Coaching, I invited her here so that we can kind of sit down and talk about what we talk about kind of in the afternoons, but really give everybody a picture of what defining those boundaries are. So Jess, why don't you start out just really quickly, tell people a little bit about yourself, and then I'll jump into some of the statistics that we're looking at as a company.
Yeah, so hi everyone who is here and also out there on Instagram Live, whoever you might be. My name is Jess Feldt, and I own Jess Feldt Coaching. I'm a life and leadership coach, and I specifically focus on coaching working parents in the workplace who are balancing their career and their family. So who have a priority and value both the career that they're building for themselves and the family that they're building for themselves. And so really trying to determine, how do you create a life you love that allows you to have both of those, that allows you to honor the boundaries that you have between both of those, and feel fulfilled with both of those, and not that one is stealing from the other.
Excellent, excellent. So I kind of thought we would open up today with looking at some of the statistics. I'm actually going to share with you guys some of the information that we present to our investment partners that are interested in possibly looking at Lake Village as a larger investment package, and our franchisee partners that are looking to open their own Lake Villages. So these are statistics that we kind of start with. This is what really drove me to open Lake Village as a woman and as a career-driven woman, but as a mother, really ultimately. So I'm curious, we're gonna share the statistics, and then I'm gonna pause and we can kind of talk about what those statistics are as needed. So let's get right into it. So this is what we open with. It says working parents say they feel stressed, tired, rushed, and short on quality time with their children, friends, partners, or hobbies. This is a New York Times based on Pew Research Center. This was an article that came out. And from that, this is the data from that same Pew Research. More full-time parents say they always feel rushed and spend too little time with their kids. And really, when you look at this, 40% say they always feel rushed and are stressed, and 50% say they feel sometimes rushed and stressed. That's 90% of working parents that feel like they're pulled in 100 different directions and not actually getting anywhere. Jess, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I am a mom to a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and even though I own my own business, when I had my older son, I was working in the more corporate world, and my husband works in the more corporate world, and yeah, I agree that you are always kind of feeling stressed, rushed, or pulled in either one of those directions.
Yeah. Well, this is one a kicker for me. Almost half of working moms take an extended break beyond maternity leave, and many consider not returning at all. I always ask our investors. This is one of the stats that I always like to share. Parents are leaving the workforce in droves because of issues with childcare. Have you quit or switched to a job because of childcare reasons? Mothers are at 62%, but even dads right now are at 36%, which is the highest percentage that we've seen in the last 20 years. That's insane. These are the things that parents are up against. These are the battles that we're fighting in and outside of the workplace. We actually have a couple of dads here, and so I think for a really long time we've been talking about the balance of home and work, and it's largely been a woman's issue. But now I think it is become, because of COVID, and one of the best things about COVID is that it is no longer a woman's issue, it is a family issue, and people are trying to figure out what that balance is. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the statistics of returning back to work and what that looks like. But this is now no longer a woman's issue, it's a family issue. But we are seeing the impact of our mothers specifically, because 2.2 million women left the workforce in 2020. One of the things that gives me a lot of anxiety as a mother of a daughter is that we are back to 1990 levels of what the workforce was. That's how many women are in the workforce right now. The same amount of women that were in the workforce in the 1990s. So all of the work that we've been busting our butts for the last 20 years, 30 years, it's kind of for naught unless we fight for change now, and that's really what this session is about. We have to fight for these policies now. We have to go to bat. We are, as small business owners, we have small business owners here as well, we have to be the example of what that new work-life balance is, or it's not going to matter. So, we can keep going through this, but I think we can kind of transition after this. I have a lot more information if you're curious. But just over half of Americans live in areas with insufficient childcare. 2/3 of childcare centers close, and 40% spend more on childcare than what they consider affordable. So the balance, again, before COVID, this was all, if somebody was sick, or if you couldn't do something, or whatever, it was on the mother's plate, and now it's on everyone's plate. And this is why parents are, if you're a corporate owner and you're watching this Instagram live, this is why people are coming to you. These are the things that they're faced with, and it's not a small amount of people that are faced with this information. It's a large quantity of people that are facing these problems, and if we don't invest back in them, we're going to see it overall, because moms and babies drive the economy. Birth rates are at their lowest level on record for 6 straight years. In the 1960s, there were 6 people of working age for every retired person. Today, we're 3 to 1. By 2035, it'll be 2 to 1. If the trend persists, it could mean a lower living standard for almost all Americans. So if we don't invest in families now, we are going to feel it whether or not you have kids, or you don't have kids, or you make these decisions, or you don't make these decisions. It's not going to matter. So we have to go. So I wanted to open up with these really strong stats, because I want people to feel emboldened. I want them to feel like, yes, I have to do this for my family, but I have to do this because if we don't do this, we have almost a social responsibility to it. How do you feel about that, Jess?
So often when I talk about changes like this, I talk about it in regards to like a me, we, and it scenario, where we often make decisions based on like me, how it involves, like how it impacts me personally as the individual. We also have to impact change through the we. So as you're saying, like if the me doesn't advocate, then the we, all of us together, doesn't begin to see any changes, which then impacts the system. And when you think about the failures to affordable childcare, when you join a wait list for childcare when you're like 3 months pregnant, that's insane, because it's so unavailable, so unattainable. That's a system problem. And so all 3 of these things, the me, we, and the it, they're all interrelated, but they kind of start with the me, that we can't see the change at the we level or at the system level if we're not kind of at the individual level saying, I'm going to advocate for this. I'm going to talk to my representatives. I'm going to go to my company. I'm going to go to my employee resource group for women in leadership or working parents and start to say, what are the policies that we can impact together? Because the individual is so tied to us as a society, as a group, and also to the system. And that's kind of, I think, underpinning all of these different stats that you just played out.
But I think at the end of the day, for most people, right, we're worried about the me, right?
Right.
So
It
let's
starts
talk.
with the me.
So let's talk
It starts
about.
with the me.
It does. It starts with the me. So this is kind of this is the society I love. I'm actually gonna kick my shoes off. I'm gonna get comfortable. Let's talk about. We know all of these things as society are a problem, right? We understand now all of these problems. You know, as a me though, as a person. Now again, we're going to talk about this from a couple of different lenses. I want to talk about this as a person that works for another company. Let's start there. As a person that works for another company, some of the things that I'm hearing now as people come to me and they're coming into Lay Village, right, is that, you know, we've spent the last 2 years working remote. I basically raised my child up to this point as a remote worker with a lot of flexibility. And now my job is asking me to come back into the office full time, and I feel like I don't have any options. So talk to me a little bit, and how many people here are in that scenario? I know we have a lot of small business owners here, so we have a couple of people here. And I'm sure a lot of people that are on the Instagram Live that are in that exact scenario. So as you're going into the meeting where you've decided that you want to stay at this company, right? Or I guess maybe talk to me about like where do we even start? Because that just blows my mind in 1,000 different ways. But you're much better at this, so why don't you talk to me? Talk to us about like what do you do? How do you break that down? Because I just immediately get like flustered and desperate. So like, what does that like really look like?
So first things first is knowing what you actually want. Like when you're talking about, I've had this remote flexibility for the last 2 years, what's really worked well for you about that? What did you actually really like about that? What has that given you the permission to do? And I think that means both on the family side and on the work side. A lot of people have felt like I didn't have to commute during this time. I was actually able to get started working earlier in the day because I wasn't trying to hurry up and get my kids out of the house and also go through an hour-long, if not longer, for some people commute to get to the office. Like, I could just get started, and that made me much more productive in the morning. But if you can't actually specify and detail out what you were looking for and what worked better for you, it's going to be really hard to turn around to your company and make the ask for what you want. Because I will actually also say a lot of these companies are saying, we want to see you back in the office. They're doing it for a very good reason as well. Because there is research that shows that when you're back in the office and back together, you get more collaboration, you get more creativity. People build stronger relationships when you're back in the office. It's not that they're just saying like, well, this is the way we used to do it, so this is the way we're going to do it now. Maybe some companies are, maybe who are more in like an old frame of mind, but there are some very good reasons and rationale for being in the office. So if you're trying to build that case for like, I loved this flexibility before, here's why, here's what I want, you have to really be able to specify in detail what it is that you want. Not just, I'm going to work 100% remote because this is what we've been doing for the last 2 years and I've really liked it. The company's going to come back to you and be like, well, that's great. But here's the reasons why we want you back in the office.
Yeah. We hear, again, we hear a lot of that. I think defining the pillars around what that is, I always encourage people to, what is the research that you want to go into too? Because and I think you talk about this a little bit later, but one of the things that I feel like I hear and see a lot is people going in blind without having their deck of cards that they're going to play ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And that deck of cards, I think, is it's imperative. You can't go in and be like, I want to work from home without having concrete reasons about why you want to do that and understanding your place and your value within that workplace as well. Mm-hmm. So it's about saying like, I want to work from home because I cut 2 hours off of my commute time, and that 2 hours I've been able to give back to the company. Yes, that means that I'm taking a longer lunch break in the middle of the day, but I am able to work my full schedule, whereas before I was actually shaving ends off here and here and here. I feel like, you know, and some of those details. What are some of those little nuances, like some of the top line things that people can outline for their employer, like what's in it for them kind of deal.
Yeah, so doing your research ahead of time is such a big deal to this, to even know what are the options that are available to you. This was pre-COVID, but I'll give it as a great example. When I was working at my corporate job and I took maternity leave, I just assumed that the only option when I came back from maternity leave was to start full-time right away. Well, I did that, and then I found out a couple months later that it might have been an option for me to have ramped back up, and that some people started part-time at 20 hours a week, and then went for that for 2 hours a week, and then the next time they started 30 hours, and they did that for 2 weeks, and then they ramped up. I didn't even know that was an option, because one, it was not laid out and offered to me, and two, I had never asked.
Right.
I never even thought about it. And so I think one of the really important aspects of doing your research is saying what precedents have been set, what formal policies are out there, and actually really looking and asking and talking to people about what is available to you. So for example, kind of the new terms that are out there with the way of working now are hybrid work, which means that you are in the office some days and you are at home some days. Some companies, that means different things. That means you get to choose when you're in the office and when you're not, how many days you are, how many you're not, whether you're in the office at specific times and sometimes you're not. It also could mean flex time. Flex time is the type of work where you get to dictate the hours that you're working, and the company agrees, okay, we're going to work this set amount of hours, but you get to dictate when those end times are and when those start times are. Maybe it's part-time and you have a couple. Maybe it's full-time, but it looks a little bit different. So one is just starting to actually get to do the research to see what are the policies that are out there that your company says, like, this is the set policy, and actually learning and asking the questions, the reason behind the policy. Because if you're going to craft your counter argument, it's understanding the reason behind why they have those policies in place. And being able to put yourself in the shoes of that leader, of that president, of that CEO who has made these decisions. Not that you necessarily have to agree what those decisions are, but if you're going to come with your counter argument, you have to be able to put yourself in their shoes to say, okay, I understand where you're coming from here, here's where I'm coming from, here's the bigger picture that we're all trying to get to together, whether that's productivity, whether that's collaboration, whether that's creativity, whether that's quantity of things created, whatever that thing might be, right? To say, this is the common thing that we're working together, here's how we're going to get here. And I think that plays to what you said, like, the what's in it for me, right? The what's in it for me is I'm going to help you get to this bigger goal. What's in it for me is this also helps me get to this other goal, but we're both reaching that same spot together.
And I think that this is, you kind of mentioned like another thing, and it really is, especially in a corporate structure, you need to know who you're asking. You need to be asking the right people. Sometimes your direct manager, frankly, does not have the power to make the changes that you want.
9 out of 10 times your direct manager does not have the power to make the changes.
No.
Sorry, Roy.
That's not a knock against anyone's manager, right? But oftentimes these policies are put at play at an organizational level. And so your manager might be feeling the same pain that you're feeling and not really have a lot of things to say against it. You really have to figure out who is that decision maker, who is it that you're trying to influence, and that comes back, I think, to different ally groups or ERGs, employee resource groups, whatever you want to say, like to be able to find the momentum to say, you know, this is a policy that's in place, it's been put in place for this reason, we think this actually hurts this population of people, this might hurt you if this portion of the population leaves or decide that they want to do something else. Like, let's get the momentum behind that.
100%. And I will say, you know, again, one of the stats that I found as I was doing my research for all of this too is 66% of employers are offering a hybrid work model right now. So if your company is downright refusing to work with you on this, chances are you're going to find another company that's able to give you what you need. The other thing that I always like to remind families too, is when we start to hear these stories and you're working in a corporate setting, is that you're not in a vacuum. There is an incredible shortage of employees willing to take on the work that maybe employers are expecting right now. It's really tough to hire. If you go on Google, you can go in, you can do the research for yourself. There's all these jobs, but there's people that are downright unwilling to do them. So there's actually a shortage of employees right now. So we as employees hold the power. I'm actually not an employee, I'm a boss, so I don't know what I'm talking about. But y'all hold the power to be able to do these things. So don't be scared to really make that, draw that line.
Well, I think part of that just goes to knowing your value. And so just as much as you're doing research within your company to figure out like what are the policies, what precedents have been set, who can I negotiate with, it's also doing your research outside of the company. Because if you're going to really go in a strong position to ask, you have to truly know and be confident in what your value is. And this is really just negotiation tactics, not necessarily kind of like work-life balance or anything, but negotiation tactics say, know what you're willing to walk away from, and know that going into the conversation. Not to threaten, because no one wants to burn any bridges and go in and say, if you don't do this, I'm leaving. That's not the goal of this, right? But to truly know, at what point is this not a good deal for either you or for me? Because if I'm staying and I'm committing to something that I don't agree with and that's going to make me resent the company, then I'm not good for the company. And if the company is agreeing to something that actually they don't believe is going to be good for me as an employee or good for my career, that's not good for the company either.
Right.
So there has to be like a walk away point that you have to know going into that conversation that says, I know what I need in order to be a good employee, to honor my family, to know what I want. And if you can't get me this and we can't come to terms, then I know that I can walk away and I can get this somewhere else. And again, not as a threat, not to burn bridges, but just to genuinely say, this is not going to work out for anyone if these certain conditions are not met.
100%. And this is actually kind of segues us into the next category of workers that I wanted to touch on, which is people that own their own companies and the responsibility that we have to our employees as well. I'm one of those people, actually, that's the majority. Honestly, a lot of the people that work at Lake Village own their own companies. And so one of the things that I really wanted to touch on too is, usually your boss is not the devil for the most part. We're trying to do the best that we can. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on the way that bosses, or whether you own your own business, you own your own small business, and you have a small team of people that you're trying to balance all of this with, whether you are, or whether, you are a manager as a part of a larger corporation. What does that look like for that side of the table?
I mean, I'd love to just say it's as simple as being real and being human. I mean, to say you know what the work is that needs to get done, and what are the different ways that can get done. I think for the hang up for many people over the last couple of years is that we've proven that a lot of this work can be done remotely.
Right.
And so what's human about that? What's real about that as a manager, being able to say like, yes, I get that, and you have done this. You know what? I do think we're missing this one element. Okay, let's talk about that one element. I think so much of world of work, whether you're a manager, whether you're an employee, is just being able to have empathy for other people. Also be able to say like, and this is the work that needs to be done for us to have a business, a successful business. Right. I mean, Daniela, you work in childcare. People cannot work remotely and be in childcare.
No, but and this is something that I talk to people a lot about, and this is something I talk to my husband about. He's here. Is that we can't offer flexibility on the same terms that maybe a large conglomerate can. It's just impossible. Yeah, he owns a manufacturing company. I own Lake Village, childcare oriented. You can't work from home at this job. You gotta be here. Same thing for him. They're building things. They have to be present with the tools and the resources that they have. There are other ways to be able to offer folks flexibility and the flexibility that they want. And so for me, it's about flipping it over and offering things in the way that makes sense for our staff. It's about offering them a ton of vacation time. We, they have On top of that, we're closed several days, several weeks a year. They get those, so that's super flexible for them. They're, we allow you to bring your kids to work, which is like a huge thing. If you have kids here, you can bring your kids with you. That's something that's super important to a lot of our parents. So it's, one of the things that Nate really struggled with, and I apologize for speaking on your behalf, but when they returned from COVID, he was like, nobody wants to work a 40-hour week anymore. I'm really struggling to find people that want to work that full stint. And he said, so what? Who cares? So they work 30 hours a week, and you hire a part-timer to fill that in, and yes, it's more lift on our end. It's more work, and this is another way that we offer the type of flexibility at Leaf Village. We're cobbling stuff together to try to work with everybody's schedules, because they need to come in late on this day, and somebody's got this thing on this, so they got to leave early, but they can only work Tuesday, Thursday. So frankly, as a boss, it's a nightmare. It's terrible. But we can't offer the remote work, so we work extra hard on the other side of it to cobble together the type of schedules for our employees so that they have a little bit of that breathing room as well. And it is not a perfect science, but it's us being human and going that extra mile.
Right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day for you, it's better to keep the great employees 100%. That you have,
yes,
and try and make it work for everyone versus lose everyone, because you're right, like some of the past couple of years have proven, like, no, I don't have to go into an office 5 days a week. And if you make me come into an office 5 days a week, then I'm going to go find an opportunity elsewhere because they don't make me.
Right.
And I mean, that's kind of the biggest way that's
perfect. Like, where's
we're at 10%.
Okay. Phone, don't do this to me, phone. You just stay on. We're just gonna get through this. So I think you're right. COVID changed a lot of things, and frankly, it was really challenging, but it also changed a lot of things for the better.
There's a huge equity component to it too.
Absolutely.
Because I think for many people pre-COVID, it was women who are often asking for these types of flexible schedules, for hybrid schedules, for these types of things. And now it's common across the board for men and women. And now it's mandated by many companies because either one, they've given up real estate space, so they don't have the office space. And so it's actually more, I think, in some cases, not all, I'm not going to generalize, right? But in some cases, it's actually more equitable now because it's not just women who are at home, it's men and women who are at home.
100%. And this is something, we talk about, we have talked here quite a bit about the motherhood penalty versus the fatherhood bonus and all of the stuff that people were dealing with really pre-COVID. And now, you're right, we are really seeing, and so one of the things that we really struggle with, and again, like in our own family, and my husband works so hard at this, is that like, he's like, this wasn't a thing 5 years ago for people to, today, we literally, as an example today, I spent the first half of the day ushering Vivi in and out of Park District classes, because this was something that we really wanted to be able to do with her, and it's one day, and he picked up the other half of that day, so that so that we could do this with her. And this, but again, 5 years ago, when we look at dads, never would have happened, would never have it would have been a mom's responsibility, but we are rewriting the script right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so every time there's guilt, frankly, for him. He feels bad because he feels like maybe it's not a good look because he's the owner and he needs to be there and
it's
he needs to
coworker
whatever.
guilt.
It's coworker
so,
guilt.
I mean, I
yes.
talk about this a lot, just as much as we have mom guilt, and this is, I think, common for men and women when you have kids, just as much as you have mom guilt that you're like not showing up enough for your kids because you're doing this, there's also such a thing as coworker guilt, because prior to having kids, you were able to spend all of your extra time at work, and you were able to do all the events and volunteer for all the extra roles and do all of the things. And then when you have a kid and you have that additional priority that you're like, wait, this gets my time, you don't just have guilt for not being able to spend all your time with your child, you also have that guilt for not being able to spend all that extra time dedicated to work.
Yes.
I mean, that is very
this is
real thing.
Yes. That is I think the biggest struggle, and I don't have any coworkers, but I have people that my team that I'm trying to show up for. So it's like you're constantly being like, I need to, be here or do this thing or whatever, or well, I wasn't there, and so now I need to, it's like you're constantly shuffling things, and you're burning the candle at both ends basically all the time. It's exhausting.
Well, and it kind of brings it back to the idea of boundaries, which kind of like encompasses all of this, right? Is we all have to individually know what are the boundaries that are really important to us, and be able to like lay those out first for ourselves. Like, if all things in the world were perfect, and I think this is if you work for someone else, if you work for yourself, if you're just like, hey, I'm in a partnership and I need to know what my boundaries are with my partner.
That was our third category was partnership. So you either work for corporate, you either own your own thing, but then the third part of setting all of these asks is your home life. So you're transitioning us perfectly.
Wonderful. But yeah, it's being able to say, what are the boundaries that I need to be able to show up in the way that I want to show up? And that's kind of like very much on the me side. Like, if I'm going to show up the way to my career I want to show up, what are the boundaries that I need to hold for myself? If I want to show up in the way I want to be a mom, what are the boundaries that I need to hold? If I want to show up in the way I want to show up as a partner, what are the boundaries that I need to hold?
And so I'm gonna open it up a little bit here because we've been talking a lot ourselves, and I want to like get people involved. Everybody list. Just call out the first thing that comes to mind. What's your biggest struggle in setting a boundary, either at home or at work, depending on like what it is? What's your biggest hurdle?
My child.
What you're saying, the guilt.
I was guilt.
Yeah, guilt.
If you're not doing one thing, you're feeling guilty for not doing it.
Yeah.
Or as a small business owner, feeling guilty for the partner who has a full-time study, they have to be here, but asking.
You have all the
But I have
flexibility.
the flexibility,
Yeah.
which means I'm up until 1 a.m. working.
Right.
Yep.
But likewise, if my partner is a mother, she works and she works very hard, and I feel like she's doing so much and I'm not doing enough, but I still need rest. So I have a hard time like defining like
Boundaries for yourself.
boundaries for myself.
Yeah.
So guilt is probably the number one driver of why it's hard to maintain boundaries. And one thing I'll throw out there for you to think about as you're thinking through all these things that kind of like cause that guilt to to say like, I can't maintain this boundary that I feel like I need. Is it healthy guilt or is it irrational guilt? Because guilt is an innate feeling that we feel just because we're human. Everyone has guilt. Healthy guilt is the guilt that says, I am doing something wrong. It's the feeling that makes me say, I know I'm doing something wrong. I need to correct that. The most extreme sense, I robbed a bank. I feel guilty that I robbed a bank. I know that I stole from people. I need to not do that in the future, right? That's healthy guilt.
Right.
Irrational guilt says there's something that I feel like I'm doing wrong, or there's a value here that I am compromising. But in reality, there's nothing I could do differently. It's out of my control, or even if I could do something differently, I wouldn't.
Right.
And so really all it's doing is causing me to spiral into this feeling of guilt that's not helping anyone because I'm not going to change my behavior. And if that's the case, then guilt isn't serving anyone. And so it's really helpful to think about, what do I want to replace that feeling of guilt with? Maybe it's a feeling of gratitude. I am really grateful for my partner that they have been able to do this. So instead of feeling guilty because I know I have these work responsibilities, and I can't, nor do I necessarily want to change those work responsibilities, I'm going to replace that feeling of guilt with gratitude. Or perhaps it's like, I'm going to replace that feeling of guilt with, maybe it is action. Maybe it is telling you there's something that needs to change. And it's not like there's something that's bad or good, like
Just
judgment,
honesty.
but just like, something that like I want to change about this. And so like there's a different feeling there. So it's kind of thinking like, is this a healthy guilt or is this a rational guilt?
And
if this is a rational guilt, what do I want to do about it?
And I think that that's like really what it is. Like, I feel like most of our guilt is probably unhealthy guilt. Let's be serious. Nobody here has robbed any banks,
Right?
I know of. That I know of.
How do
But
you think I pay for a village?
But I do think that like it's like one of two things. I love the gratitude. This is something that Nate and I work really, really hard on. We both own small businesses. It basically means we're working all the time, and when we're not working, we're parenting. And this is something that I've been very open with in this space, is that like, I feel like being the primary parent is very hard, even though I absolutely signed up for it, and we absolutely literally started this business so that I could do that. But it's exhausting, and so it got to the point where I was just like, I can't do this anymore, and I would encourage you not to do what I did, which was like have an anxiety attack and like melt into a puddle and like be like, I really need help with this, and like don't get there, because then it became this like, I just basically like passed my guilt onto him, which was like super not productive and not, I was not being a good partner.
Well, that's also why I love that this is called the big ask, because the ask could be to your company, the ask could also be to your partner, right? Because oftentimes when we're complaining about things, what's hidden in that complaint is an unsaid request. So if I am complaining that I feel like you are working all the time, that's actually not what your complaint is. It's an unsaid request of, I need some of my own space.
Yes.
And so really getting clear of like, if there's these things that I'm feeling really resentful for at the moment, these things that I feel like I'm really complaining because it feels unfair, it feels like, I don't know, whatever something is off, there's really a hidden unsaid request in there. And so what is the ask that you need to make? Whether that's, I need more time for myself, or I need you to step in more here. Or sometimes it's like, you know what, I actually need you to step out here. Because when you are coming home from work and you're frustrated from work of the day, like you're actually not helping when you come in with your work frustration. And so it's like, my request is I need you to take some time to kind of like unload whatever it is that you're coming in from work, so you can come in and help with the kids and be, helpful.
Yeah. And I think that we all have to define those small nuances. Do you have any tips for like helping people find what again, for me, it's usually like, and it's just a terrible way to do it, but it's usually like when I've hit my like meltdown point where I'm like, I need time for myself, and it's like, okay, if this is the literal first time that you have ever said this to me, can you please not yell at me about this thing? Like, I'm happy to give you time for yourself. I'm happy to help you, but you have to ask me. So how do you help people find their boundary? How do you help people do that? I don't feel like people know how to do that.
And I like this in the framework of, you're coming from, okay, when you're going to your boss, you have to do your research. What's the, you know what I'm saying? I was like, okay, I like this in the framework of that, where it's like, how can I prep myself to have these conversations when I'm not so emotional?
It's actually not that dissimilar from going and doing your research to ask a company or a boss, because what each of those require is time to step back and not be in the emotional brain of it, but to be able to have create the space for reflection, to get all the emotional brain out on paper. Put yourself into the shoes of the other person, just as if you were to put yourself into the shoes of your company or of your boss or of anything. To put everything you're feeling out on paper. All the venting is good. Like when I'm coaching clients and I can tell they're in like a super emotional space, say, you have the next 3 minutes, vent as much as you want. Put it out there, because if you don't vent, you're just going to be holding it in and you're not going to get it out there. Get as much as you want there out. Once you've gotten it all out, you've gotten the emotional brain out, let's start accessing the rational brain a little bit. Let's start stepping into, well, what is your partner thinking about this? Where are they coming from this? Chances are, if you're married to the person, I would hope they have your best interest in heart just as much as you have their best interest in heart. And so put yourself into their position and begin to think of it like a little bit less from the emotional brain into the irrational brain. What is the joint goal that we're reaching at towards the top, just as if I was at a company,
right?
And I'm trying to think about what are we both trying to get for here together, and begin to kind of craft then your ask in that way, because so much of it is the ask.
Yeah, and I think you hit setting. I think that really, I'm like a step-by-step person. You have to set the joint goal together as a team, right? Like, what are we trying? Nate and I, we're not honestly traditional parents. We are not doing it the easy way. We're doing it the way hard way, because we really want to be present with Vivi. We really want to spend that time with her, and it takes extra work for us to be able to do that. But we decided jointly a long time ago that was going to be a priority for us. That we had a limited amount of time before she started school. We don't know that we're having another child for multitude of reasons, and so we really wanted to invest in this time with her that we are never going to get back. And so that was something that every time I get like, we fall off the page of each other, we come back to that joint goal of like, this is what we outlined for ourselves. Right now, I feel like we're not getting there 50-50, and we always come back to the table with each other and say like, okay, what can I do to be supportive? And I think one of the things that we're actually really good at is giving each other the benefit of the doubt. That human factor is huge.
That you assume the other person has good intent. The second that you stop assuming that the other person has good intent is the second that relationship is completely ruined. I mean, just full stop.
Yeah.
If you cannot assume that the other person has good intent, there's almost no coming back from that.
Yeah. I think that that's really, like, it's just a really strong statement. Yeah. Like, so we always start with the top level goal, and then it's like, okay, let's talk about barriers to that goal. Let's talk about what are our barriers to that. You know, it could be work, you know, again, speaking in our specific, you know, family example, for us, it's schedule, and guilt is like another, you know, so and I always encourage people, I'm like, write it down. Like, talk about it, put it on a piece of paper, and you each write it down. Each write down, like, what you feel like the barriers to that goal is, and then come back to the table, read those barriers, or you might be surprised what the other person thinks are the barriers to that goal, and then you can start to work as a team to overcome those barriers. I feel like that's like really, really important.
If I make one recommendation ever, there's a book called Crucial Conversations, which is really more geared probably towards like business communication, but has helped me so much in just personal communication and relationship communication so much. And the key point to Crucial Conversations is being able to contribute to a shared goal, to shared meaning, to whatever it is you're working towards the same goal.
Yeah.
Ryan, my husband, he read the book. I read the book, and I feel like it has informed so much of how we each communicate with each other during those really crucial communication points. I know we both read it just because of business. We were working at the same company, so we went through the same training. Like, we both read it. But like on a personal level, I always recommend it to anyone who's like in a relationship. It is so valuable.
Well, and just learning how to communicate with your partner.
Absolutely.
You know, like,
communicate with anyone.
Yeah.
Communicate
you know, taking that
anyone.
pause. One of the things, it's so funny, one of the things that this will be the last, you know, big thing that we talk about with partnership, but one of the things that I've really found helpful in my marriage is how I communicate with my toddler. Because sometimes I did not realize how irrational I am as a person.
Like you
And
say
toddlers
are, but no, you are.
Me,
Okay.
totally. In the moment, when I'm throwing it, I throw tantrums still. I still have my own moments where I get really frustrated or I'm really stressed, and I take it out on people around me. It's nothing to do with them, and it's not just me, by the way. But I'm not that crazy, you guys. I see it all the time. Okay, I see it all the time.
I'm also crazy.
Yeah, I'm like.
Toddlers can be very rational.
Yeah,
Irrational.
yeah, exactly. I see it often with people, and so I really I feel like taking the coaching that I give my toddler when she's like feeling really overwhelmed, and taking you know, all this stuff. If you don't follow Big Little Feelings, go follow that account. It's a fantastic resource. But like deep breaths and all of the things, and then thanking me and saying I'm sorry. I say it all the time.
But validating anything that you ever say about dealing with toddlers and tantrums is validate what they are feeling. Because someone's feelings are true. I don't care if you're 3 years old or if you're 38 years old. Whatever someone emotionally is feeling, that is what they are feeling. That is true to them. Validate what they are feeling. Don't invalidate it because it doesn't match what you are feeling. Validate what they're feeling. Same as if you're working for an employer or for a boss and you're trying to come to like with an agreement or like an ask of what it is. Validate that they are probably feeling they don't know how to build connection with their teams. They don't. I'm sorry. Bosses and leaders do not know how to build connection with their teams remotely. They're figuring it out right now because they've never been required to do it before. Validate that that is true. And then present your counter argument to it, because what you are feeling is just as valid, but so is what they are feeling.
the way my mom used to say it was, honey goes a lot farther than vinegar.
Mm-hmm.
And it really does. It really does. Whenever I like really want to go in at somebody hot, because I have my days, you know. And I'm a leader here, you know, where it's like you're frustrated with someone, you want performance in a certain way, you want positivity, you want all of these different things. Sometimes it's not best to go in when you're feeling that way. Give it a lot of space. Come back around to it. You know, going in hot is never the answer. Take a deep breath. Come back at that same conversation, and you're going to get a lot farther because you're going to be able to come at it with kindness. And that goes up. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't speak strongly, because I'm all about the data and I'm all about the information and what we deserve as a working population. But if you come at it with a softer approach, you're going to get a lot farther, frankly. And then you can bust out your data if you need to. You know what I mean? If it like gets to like brass tacks, but.
I mean, I think it was like assume positive intent, right? Like no one is trying to make these decisions to make anyone's life miserable.
Right.
And if honestly, if you truly believe that is the case, it
Then
probably means it's time to leave your employer.
Definitely
Like if that is
don't work
really
at
what
all.
you truly believe, you're far past probably the point of even asking.
Yeah, 100%. And there are people that are there. That they're like, this place is the worst. And I'm like, then why? Because like at that point, you're already salty about it. If you really feel like it's like not a positive working environment, or that, you know, that your boss doesn't care about you. You know, I've talked to people and I'm like, my boss doesn't care about me. I'm like, why are you still working in a place that your boss doesn't care about you? Like that, why? There's lots of jobs out there. There's so many.
Right.
But change is hard.
Change is hard, and if
And
there
people
is,
struggle
and
with
there are
those
sometimes situations where you don't feel like I can leave that because this is stable and I don't know what's out there.
Right.
We are luckily in the type of employers market right now, our employees market, where for most people that's not the case. There are many options out there because of the type of market we're in. That's not always the case, so sometimes you have to take advantage of those situations.
Right.
But generally speaking, I think if you're in a situation where you believe everyone has the best intent, then okay, you can probably work something good out.
Yeah. Talk to me. We're going to close this. What are everybody? We'll call this out to the group. Talk to me about some of the what's the word I'm looking for? No's that you've you know what I mean? That employers are like, well, I can't do this because excuses.
I mean, the biggest one is going to be, I can't do this because we have a policy, and if I have to do it for you, then I have to do it for everyone else.
Okay.
That's going to be the biggest no across the board.
What are some of the other no's that we've heard that people have heard, and either in the past or currently?
I guess I'll throw it out to the group here before I throw any more
Like
out.
budgetary restrictions, or working about, you know, is your productivity going to go down?
Fear it'll change and turn worse rather than status quo is always the best.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard a lot about like, well, we need to have collaborative environments and team, and we don't think that you can do that.
Yeah.
And there's truth to that. There really is. Like, I don't want to I don't want to invalidate anyone's regard. The like being in person actually does really help you build team building, and employees will agree that they feel more connected to their employees when they're in person. What I think begins to be the problem is when you say, well, then that means you have to be in the office for 3 days every single week, versus saying, let's identify the really key moments where we need to feel like we're in person.
Yeah.
Versus
Love
like
that.
this kind of like across the board generalization for everyone, because there's definite truth to that.
Yeah.
That when you are in person, you build stronger relationships. Well, how can we still do that and allow for the flexibility for people to feel like they can be where they need to be, instead of this generalization across the board that everyone needs to be in for this day, every single week.
Right. Which really, it doesn't
It's not
always serve.
actually
Yeah,
flexible.
it's actually not flexible. One, it's not flexible, and two, it's not.
It might be
actually
hybrid,
proven.
it's not flexible.
100%. What else we got? Anybody else think of anything?
And we had someone on the Instagram live saying just checks and balances. There's a response that bosses say, checks and balances.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say to that. Like, what checks and balances? Like, there's so much room for curiosity. Like, what checks, what balances, what am I doing when I'm in, what's happening when I'm not?
So I'm here
Just go away.
validate the feeling
Yeah,
and then ask
validate
them
the
to get
feeling.
specific.
Yes.
Yeah.
Validate the feeling. I hear that this is important for you. Can you expand for me what specifically is important about this for you?
Are you doing what you're supposed to? Is another one we're seeing come through.
Yeah, and that's so much of a culture thing. Those types of things that think like if you're not in the office, you're not being productive. That is such a culture thing for companies, and that's actually, I think, something that's really important to think about. Do you want to be working in a culture that feels like they have to be looking over your shoulder for you to be productive, or can the last 2 years be proof that you can be productive? And that, I think, is really one of those points to say, what is the culture of the organization I want to be working at, versus what is the culture of the organization I would love to be working at, and really being able to target that.
And I think
And I think this is an opportunity to help the companies that you're with develop that culture.
Yeah.
Everybody is starting from scratch.
Yep.
The culture is completely different at every single company because it's been completely upended,
Yep.
and there's this whole new opportunity to help build what looks good for everybody, feels good for everybody, and healthy.
we talked a lot about the men and women equity, but we actually haven't talked at all about race equity, and that's a huge thing that corporations, if they're not looking at it, they should be looking at it. I wrote this down because it was pretty insane. The largest percentage of people that want to go back full time are white men. At 30%, which is not frankly a large statistic. Only 30% of anybody, by the way. This is the largest statistic that want to go back. The smallest percentage of people that want to go back to work full time is actually black men. It's not women. Black men only want to go back to 15%, and it's because they feel like they have had a more equitable experience as a remote employee versus
It's not surprising.
right. People are like, oh, and so that's something that's like some like crazy.
I would
stuff
add
to-
into that, because I'm sure that whatever study this was did not have this as a breakout, but pregnant women as a population of people that does not want to go back, because when you're on Zoom, you don't have to tell people that you're pregnant. They don't know.
right.
And so no one is judged for the fact that they are showing up to meetings pregnant, and that, I mean, they can make their plans, they can announce later, there's all these things that say like, I can show up the same as anyone else, and you don't know that I'm pregnant, and you're not bringing your unconscious biases into these meetings with me being
Great. And I challenge again these small business owners. How if you can't provide people any sort of remote, how else can you do that? What else can you offer? We gave one of our employees maternity leave, and we didn't have to. That's not an expectation. I've fought for it. It's frankly the thing that I'm proudest of most at Lay Village. We fought to give her that financially and otherwise, because if we don't set the example as small business owners, then we are not doing that part of this job.
Yeah.
And so, again, if you're an employee going to bat for yourself, if you're an employer or a small business owner that's defining those roles for yourself, be bold, think big, because now is our chance to do this.
Be open.
Be open.
Well, and especially when you're talking about this environment where people are, where are the good employees? Well, they're going to stick with companies. We're past that point where corporations are throwing you out with everything else. It's like now it's back to small business.
The
Like,
second that anyone
where's the
throws out the
loyalty?
excuse that people just don't want to work, and
No.
be like, nope, you're done.
no.
Policies as businesses is to create a best practice. Is this still the best practice? We can't have a policy that's 10 years old. Is that seriously still reflective of the current culture and industry? So HR managers or anybody else that's on this, who cares if that's a policy? Like, relook at your policies and make sure that your policies are written to enforce your best practices. We still have an opportunity here.
Yeah.
This is what it is. It's stressful, it's hard. But the people that are like, I'm just gonna do this thing because it's easier, whatever else, we have an opportunity to create change in the workplace forever, for our kids, for ourselves, for our kids, for all of these different things. We can change the way people work right now. If we choose not to do that, we may not ever have this opportunity again. COVID gave us this chance. And so I encourage people that if if you're passionate about remote work, or you're
It's just
passionate, or
flexible.
flex work,
Flexible.
or
I would just
hybrid
say,
work, or
flexible
whatever.
about remote, right? Because I think even just dictating that everyone has to be remote is not the best for everyone either.
Right.
It's really this idea of being able to be flexible. That's what's, I think, really the important takeaway here.
Yeah. All right, guys, thank you so much. I hope this was helpful. Again, we're Lake Village Cowork. We are all about co-working, childcare, balancing work and life. This is who we are. If you haven't heard from us, please head to our website. It is www.lakevillagecowork.com. It's in our link in bio as well. Thank you so much. Good night. See you guys later.